The Underground, Ideas into Action presents an Underground Chat, where we bring the underground conversation to you. Today's topic, Smart Data, Modeling the Future, with Shazia Manus, Chief Strategy and Business Development Officer with AdvantEdge Analytics and CUNA Mutual Group.
Hi there. I'm excited to share that Shazia Manus, the Chief Strategy and Business Development Officer for AdvantEdge Analytics and CUNA Mutual Group, will be joining us today to talk about how data can make a difference to us in reaching members and potentially changing the world. Good morning, Shazia. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. How are you, Sue?
I'm great. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for an Underground Chat. As I reflect upon what's going on in the world, we're having change every day, and our response to those events, personally and professionally, have required us to demonstrate compassion, flexibility, resilience, love. There are just so many things that I think are hitting our hearts and hitting our heads right now. The pandemic forced all of us to quickly respond to what was taking place in the crisis, and the industry did it. You did it, CUNA Mutual did it, the credit unions around the world did it. Now we're in a position where we're faced with social change, and all of us are standing up and responding to that as well. So as I look to the future, one of the things I really wanted to chat with you about is there's no better time for us to take a look at the environment, take a look at the evolution, and really talk about what we're going to need to do as we move forward. So I wanted to start with, how wonderful it is to see you, and just ask, you and your family doing okay? Your loved ones doing okay?
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I mean, given the circumstances, we certainly have the privilege as well as the stability, both from health, from economic, from all facets of it. So I'm very, very grateful. And then my heart goes out to so many who are less fortunate like us. So all we can do is support, listen, and kind of do our part, and really happy to be here, and thank you for in this look forward to having a good dialogue.
All right. Well, let's get started. So in February, we got together in Washington, D.C. to talk about subjects that we were interested in. And one of those was Maslow's theory of the hierarchy of needs. And we chatted about the fact that we go through these different life stages. And as we go through them, we're in a position to have different needs. So basic needs, things as as fundamental as food and water and shelter, moving on to the idea of us being able to look to our future, plan for our future. I loved the conversation. It was a vulnerable conversation. And then 2 weeks later, we all found ourselves concerned about our safety, concerned about going back and figuring out the simplest of things for our family, but truly all of us in the same place. So I was wondering about, how has your personal journey prepared you for what we're seeing at this time in history?
Yeah, interesting. I too have, now that we are all in this compulsory retreat for several, weeks, gives you the time to be reflective and thoughtful. I don't know if my personal story as a person of color with diverse roots and origin is any different from so many who have gone through. Filled with my full share of pain, despair, hopelessness, standing up, navigating, pushing hard to fit in, finding your voice, all of that. I don't know whether my story or for anyone, it really prepares you for what we are experiencing, because it's so unprecedented, and I don't know if you can prepare for it. But I do think what has given me, lend me a lens to be really appreciate, as well as deep listening, learning, giving the tools and the empathy to my teams to be able to come together, whether help those who are struggling with COVID, related struggles are right now this systemic inequality and racism that has been just we have kind of looked the other way or have somehow evaded it. Now it allows for a conversation and a systemic reform. I am gives I'm very thankful and gives a sense of comfort knowing I'm part of an organization that truly prioritizing the compassion and allowing an environment, not that there's an answer to fix anything because it's so systemic, as I said, but at least allowing the conversation and dialogue and appreciating to get those stories out so we can listen, we can learn, but more importantly, we can act. In terms of pandemic, I do think it's an opportunity. I think Bill Gates said that this post-coronavirus would be defining this era, not only from obviously now what we are seeing as a societal reform towards equality and justice, probably will also flourish human creativity and ingenuity, which we are noticing how grocery fintech are pivoting quickly in real time to use computer vision technology for contact tracing, trying to see which employees have come in close proximity to one another. You're noticing, in healthcare industries that care professional testing has evolved into more self-swabbing or even at-home type of testing, which FDA approved. In the financial sector, we are noticing IBM's Watson AI technology has found a new need to push more COVID information to consumers, right, via chatbot. Across the global, knowing that you work with so many through World Council countries across the world in Kenya, Saudi Arabia, even Uganda, Ghana, they have felt a need to expedite digital payments, and to that end, they have reformed, changed limits on transactions, parameters, and policies to increase more mobile transactions. I think I read somewhere, like in where was it? In Ethiopia, that they are allowing basic financial services to be offered to non-banks. So all these things are really allowing creativity and ingenuity to come in. So I'm hopeful, and I hope that in moments like this, we don't lose hope, but we stand up, we speak up, and we do the things that we need to do and tap into that human creativity.
I think it's interesting to just follow up on that, the idea that the digital revolution can create connections and in some ways create an equal environment if we have access to it.
Correct.
And that's the one thing with working with World Council and taking a look at what's taking place around the world is that we need to push for access. We need to push within the United States to have iPads available, to have laptops available as we move to a virtual world. Even though we may not stay in the same circumstance that we are today, it certainly has verified what we've talked about for digital revolution. And I think it really fits into the diversity issue as well. We see people that can't access information or get the education for their children. And I do believe that that's something that we all have to speak out about. I, like you, have felt my voice has been something that I personally want to commit to the world and to say it loudly and to bring our industry to a place where we're all feeling vulnerable and we can all share those thoughts. But people like you that have been willing to share your voice from the beginning, and I value that. So I just want to make that point. As we look down the road, the people that are being left behind, whether it's from the COVID, which actually made us all in this together from a health perspective, but now as we look at the people being left behind from a generations and generations standpoint, what do you think is going to be the most critical long-term issue that we need to be focusing on for our communities?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. I think there's two dimensions to your question, the way I think about it. One is from the community. I mean, community is made up of service providers like credit unions, healthcare, and it's part of, but it's built of people, consumers. And so there's one dimension to how do you rebuild communities, which is made up of people and society as a whole, and then a dimension of our credit union industry. So from a community standpoint, I would say this global pandemic has brought one thing to the forefront is this whole heightened inequality that we have. We all have all seen the minority people of color, whether it's Black, whether it's Latino, whether it's women, have been hit hard, not only from the health facet, but also socioeconomically speaking. And there's many reasons, but one of the most prevalent reasons that spikes up that though they are in those facets of jobs that get furloughed quickly as a result of that. So I think what it does is it allows for opportunity for credit unions to reach out, build trust to those segments of the population where they have no hope, they have no place to go. So how do we do that? Now I will tell you, the onset of the pandemic, the regulators have come up and have articulated their intention, right, to be that they will be reasonable. So it's not free pass, but at the same time, I think that determination for that ingenuity and that creativity to apply to reach out to those segments of consumers to rebuild the community is needed now more than ever, and credit union has a part to play. The second concern that I have on that front from the industry standpoint would be first that we don't get paralyzed and frozen in time with inertia, with over analysis by paralysis, or this scarcity mindset. Because I think speed, you mentioned agility, resiliency is needed now more than ever to be able to go out and reach those market segments, reach out to those vulnerable population that are struggling and have been hit hard. And we have a part to play in that. So that would be one concern that we need to be mindful. The second one would be that we make changes, but changes are not holistic. And it's not systemic, and it doesn't lead to helping and lifting the consumers and the community and the society, because it will have to be rebuilt. It has to be, there needs to be a very comprehensive effort has to put into play, whether how we construct our channel, how we construct our product, how we look at disseminating those solutions out. So those would be a couple dimensions. I look at it from, and credit union has a part to play. So my hope would be to watch out for those facets.
When we looked at the industry and we know all of the good things that we're doing to respond and to help members and to help beyond that, to help the communities, I think that we can feel good about that work. We can feel positive about that work. In addition to that, we also have to push ourselves for progress. And I think that that's what resonated with what you were talking about today, because I can sit here and say, I've been committed to this my life, my whole life I've been committed. But today I have to be committed differently. Mm-hmm. I have to look at things in a different way. And financially may be our tendency as we go forward. What's this going to do to the members? What's the safety issue and the security issue? But long term, that's what we were founded to do as credit unions.
Yes.
So having data to be able to support that, not just from the standpoint of analytics, which is critical to it, but you also have the ability to subset and to do deeper dives and to find the people that are potentially being left behind, and also while also serving the people that are managing through this, that could be working and trying to ensure their whole family's taken care of, and then obviously our seniors, and the fact that we want to make sure, I don't know how we define seniors today, but idea that we have all of these generations.
Yes.
One of the things you said to me that fascinated me is you talked about the phases, and you said there's kind of the reaction phase where we're responding. to the crisis. Then there's the recovery phase, which we're in some cases hoping that we're moving into. We'll wait to see about that. And then the transformation phase. And I think that applies to all social and what's taking place in the world today. So could you describe that for me a little bit?
Yeah, and I will use the business lens to that as well. So I mean, post-COVID, I think we are all kind of sitting in this react response mode, where if you look at it from a credit union's lens, it's all about taking care of your employees, their health, safety, providing critical services to best of your ability to new channels, maybe introducing new channels, you're finding processes, amending those to process stimulus checks or restructuring loans, foregoing fees, etc., ceasing collection. So these are all, I call it, just necessary, basic to your Maslow's hierarchy things that you have to kind of do at this phase. As the economies are starting to reopen gradually at its pace, we don't know how long the recovery phase will entail, but the things that credit unions will look for is operating cost control. We all know loans will be down, fee income will be impacted, so one thing that you can control would be your expenses, right? But along with that, you will have to look for rapid automation as you're moving into digitization. And automation happens by datafying information and intelligence. So that's where the analytics type of efforts will come into play. Looking at your fee analysis, what part of your interchange fee will be displaced just by transactions moving from dipping a card to more card not present, or pay ahead type of things that are happening there. Look at probably liquidity type of analysis. If people are withdrawing funds, what will that look like? And then as you move into the transformation, it's all about really moving into more advanced strategic scenario modeling, sustainability. So all these decisions that you have made in your react response stages, there's implications, right? What would be your allowance for loan losses, or your how do you need to look for mergers, acquisition type of things? You want to look at hyper digital delivery type of capability, and obviously analytics maturity. So these are different things will happen at the different phases, and the important message here is you cannot wait for each step phases to start and end. You got to have a runway that these are going to be part of these phases and start preparing. And the best way to prepare is start small. So rather than solving for cancer, maybe start curing migraine first, right? Take baby steps, crawl. So what are the use cases and intelligence you need now to be able to not only react or response, but plan and getting those intelligence data files to be able to make informed decision as you move from phase 1 to phase 2. You can't wait for members to come and tell you what they want. So that's where the data and intelligence is needed. So rather than blanket skip a payment offering, do you want to look at trends and breadcrumbs that who needs an emergency loan, whose income has been displaced significantly, and what kind of amount they need over what time period? There are enough information and intelligence to data facets you have, credit unions have. You just need to identify what are those, what is the optimal or required element of data is needed, and that's where I use the term smart data. Bad data leads to bad decisions, but smart data leads to smart decisions. So you can start. You don't have to wait for the sophistication and technology or the know-how, but start with that, and then what happens is it leads to from one dimension to another. So I think that's how I'm kind of looking at it in the context of your question, that we have to think about the runway, what is coming, and just be prepared and taking those baby steps.
When we chatted a little bit and you talked about payroll frequencies and what potentially people can identify from that, I was talking to a CEO recently, and that's one of the first things that they're going to look at. So it reminded me of you, and I thought to myself, the information that you can provide, the insights that you have regarding what's taking place starts at the simplest level, if you will, right? And what type checks are being processed and how many people are unemployed at this point, because you're going to see a shift in the type of checks. I think you also mentioned payment systems. And a third thing that I just was curious about as you were talking, quite a few members, as we know, were looking at the PPE loans and now small business, the SBA loans. And as we move forward, some of those came from outside the industry, the new members that flowed into the credit union world because they couldn't get it from the big banks. And so that might be something else for them to be looking at as we move forward. Have you had any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of goes back to, it's an opportunity. It could be a scarcity lens, like what we don't have, what we don't know, how to do it. Or it could be, hey, it's an opportunity because there's segments of the population impacted are not being helped or don't have a place to go. So how do we quickly build those capability, either learn quickly or bring in those experiential wisdom from outside to kind of hone in our core competencies. So a small business loan is a perfect one. I mean, it's been around there. Obviously, community banks had a pretty dominant sort of footing on that front, where credit unions have stayed more on the consumer side of the house. But this could be an opportunity to really design products and services. And that's where, again, analytics and digitization comes into play. Start small, look at your risk tolerance, construct a product, set some risk parameters for concentration of risk you want to take for these type of emerging type of capability or solution you're putting it out, and test it. Test it and see, so you know worst case, best case, what that continuum threshold kind of looks like, and pivot and keep moving. So I think that's probably the essence that definitely gives us an opportunity and allows us to kind of expand our wingspan and help not only people, but also grow our footing as an industry.
Yeah, I always felt that doing the right thing is also good business. So
exactly.
I overlay what you're saying with what we're seeing and how critical Black Lives Matter initiatives and taking action are to the future. I was thinking of the reinvestment that we all should be committing to, making sure that we help with improving communities and starting businesses and making funds available. And so I just overlaid that in my brain as you were talking, that same approach could be used with our civic duties and partnering with the community leaders to be able to make sure that funds are available to improve the standard of living, to improve the lives.
Absolutely. And I think that that's the opportunity, right? I mean, we have social responsibility has been part of a cornerstone of credit unions, right? Not just by some regulatory decree, but it's just part of us, to your point, doing well by doing good, right? And people helping people. I think we have to look at that it's all people and just not people of privilege or access, whether education or health or societal, wealth. I mean, we have to look at it truly holistically and just not use that as a banner, but really live it and walk the talk. And I think the spirit is there. Now, how do we all take an action and move there? And I'm really, really hopeful because there are some great leaders and the spirit is strong. And it's needed now more than ever.
It really is, and you're right, the spirit is strong, and the spirit even coming from Chairman Hood and his communications and his commitment to working with credit unions and to look at the regulatory environment, because as you know, we're going to have a period of time here where you mentioned operating expenses. We're going to have to be looking at the bottom line and looking at our savings, which is our capital reserves and some of those things, but still at the same time have the opportunity to make a difference and to reach out. And so that's the challenge of our CEOs today. When we have crises that are financially driven, it's, you cut things, you cut expenses, you cut grants, and you improve the bottom line. We're being asked today as an industry to think beyond that. Think more strategically and to use your resources to be able to, manage that bottom line, but also ensure that you don't pull back on how important the work is that we do on a social level. So I believe data is critical to that. I need to be smart, as you said, smart data. I have to be smart in how I use my dollars.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And the beauty of the system is anytime adversity or crisis have hit, whether broader nation globally or even within in our backyard, whether it's natural disaster or any of those facets, industry is good in terms of coming together, collaborating within the system. So if individual credit union or a collection of credit unions have ideas and thoughts of challenges, there's this business model I say is available to reach out to system partners and collaborate. Maybe there's open stream innovation and collaboration where there could be whether it's capability lending or shared type of learning environment, testing, failing together. Those things available because there are providers, whether you look at it from a QSO front, you look at it from all different fintech fronts. So I think there's opportunity. It's just you have to not rely on the past or rely on memory substituting your new ways of thinking, because that could be a very easy trap to fall in. The norm or the reality we're living in is completely uncharted. No one really has a playbook or a formula. If somebody says they do, I think they're smoking something they shouldn't be. So we will all learn through this. So applying that creativity, ingenuity, trying and testing, reaching out for help, collaborating as a system, all of those will lend to this reform or transformation, not only a respective operating model, but also as a system, because the world post-COVID recovery will be different. We all know that for sure. What that will be is time will tell, but you have to start thinking on that front. And we have that edge as an industry. I truly believe we do.
I completely agree. And I think that we were talking recently about how in some ways the industry had started to look for the bigger solutions and to go outside of the industry. And we've seen that gravitate back to, we need to collaborate with people that have a common business purpose.
Yes.
And we can have a seat at the table. And so I think you're right. We're seeing more of a commitment back to collaboration. And now, based upon what's taking place in the world, we've literally got to be more vulnerable in those conversations, right? You mentioned failing faster. I mean, allowing ourselves to get together and be part of that and to have that energy. And that's the thing about you that I've always just loved, is that you're pushing for progress and you're doing it in an analytical as well as an emotional, so qualitative and quantitative in terms of the way you approach it. Well, as you look forward to what's going to take place, and I think there's uncertainty. I think there's a lot of mentally challenged issues that we're all facing on a this. And so as we look forward, what do you think are going to be some of the key things, the ideas into action that you'd like to see credit unions take?
Yeah, I think great question. I think a couple I leave behind. First, listen to the stories that your data is telling you. There's breadcrumbs, there's information there already, and just not listen, do something with it. So I think activate and knowing, doing gap, don't fall into that. Just act on it and start small. And that might be just pinpointing, very laser focused on those key business use cases that are near and dear, what those are, what success looks like, finding what are the required and optimum level of data is needed, and start there and test it. Like you mentioned, ACH, it's it's one of those untapped avenues. Credit unions have historically not tapped into because of complexity. Maybe the files and the data elements have unique codes and things like that. But there's ways, there's providers, there's partners who can help you with that. It tells you not only who is being impacted, how they are impacted, and more importantly, for example, if someone's getting $1,500 to their direct deposit has gone down to $500. The frequency, they were getting monthly, now they're getting weekly. Who is sending them the funds? Are they going to predatory lenders? So it gives you all those breadcrumbs. And then once you know who those information, then you can take an action. You can really position them, reach out. There are members, for example, you mentioned senior or those who were planning to retire. They're unsure. Are they gonna continue to contribute on their retirement? Are they gonna early withdraw it? Are they gonna borrow against it? These are big decisions. So financial resiliency comes from making prudent financial choices, and that's where analytics and data can help credit union to really help those consumers and those members or potential members kind of navigate this uncharted terrain, so to speak. The second idea is assess the members' comfort and adoption of new channels. For example, most of the credit unions have introduced, maybe they didn't have branches to help members, so they have diverted them to IVR, call center, mobile banking, digital banking. Many members first time are using those channels. So let's find out, are they first time? Are they frequently? How are they using those channels? What are they doing that is incomplete? So somebody may have attempted to apply for loans and is sitting there incomplete. So let's find out who those are and then reach out. Process breakdown. So for example, they're using first time digital channels and they try to deposit checks, say remote deposit capture, and it failed. So then you see the same transaction happening in the ATM. So that tells you there's a breakdown in your digital process. So these are all the different ways you can look at the member experience and adoption and the comfort, because the word experience gets thrown out so much, but you have to contextualize and you could break it down in real, tangible things that you can really take action on today. So those would be my two ideas.
Well, I love it. I was just thinking that the whole idea of thought leadership was just summed up in your ideas into action, because that's really what it's all about. Is we don't always know how to get started. And you said, start small, do it, take baby steps. I mean, I think that's true. There's something else that I just want to final comment on. You mentioned earlier that you're privileged to work for an organization that is so committed to the industry. And I wanted to just congratulate on CUNA Mutual, your CEO, to all of the team that we've been working with. You demonstrate what it means to be part of a cooperative and an industry that wants to give back, and you support so many important initiatives across the country, around the world. Because of CUNA Mutual, we've been able to do some of the work that we do through World Council, through the initiatives that I'm involved with, that others are involved with. And so I just want to send my personal thanks. And at times it requires this type of network for us to be able to do that. So on a personal level, I wanted to thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you. And truly, I think and the tone flows from the top. I mean, Bob Tranzo's message to both at the onset of COVID and now the situation that we are in this heightened emotional state, to our employees, to the industry, just kind of speaks that it's real, it's not superficial, it's genuine, and leaders who are really helping the employees internally to kind of creating an environment to kind of share, to listen and learn, and being so vulnerable and so authentic. That's what touches my heart, and that's what gives me hope that together we don't have the answers. I think you'll hear that from Bob over and over again, but we want to try, and our heart is in the right place, and we are committed. So, and I appreciate you acknowledging that.
Yeah. Well, from one heart to another, we really appreciate you spending the time today, and I look forward to seeing you and participating, hopefully through Zoom in a few weeks, or I guess next month when we go underground. All
Absolutely.
right?
Be safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.